On a damp September morning in 1982, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman woke up in her suburban Chicago home complaining of a sore throat. Her parents gave her a single extra-strength Tylenol capsule from a fresh bottle in the bathroom cabinet. Within minutes, the young girl collapsed onto the bathroom floor, her breathing shallow and unresponsive. Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but efforts to revive her proved entirely futile. Her sudden death left family members and attending paramedics completely baffled by what appeared to be an instantaneous physical shutdown. Hours later, in a nearby hospital emergency room, two first responders noticed a terrifying correlation when news broke that three members of another local family had suddenly died. Off-duty firefighter Philip Thomas and his brother, nurse Richard Thomas, realized that both households had recently consumed over-the-counter pain medication. A quick check of the medicine cabinets revealed identical lot numbers on the plastic containers. Pathologists quickly initiated emergency toxicology screenings on the victims, uncovering lethal concentrations of potassium cyanide within their bloodstream. The Cook County Coroner's Office immediately established a central operational command to track the unfolding crisis across the greater Chicago metro area. Investigators confirmed 7 total deaths over a 48-hour period, all linked directly to contaminated extra-strength Tylenol capsules. The terrifying pattern revealed that victims had consumed the lethal poison without any advance warning or visible alteration to the product container. Forensic pathologists realized they were dealing with a deliberate act of mass homicide targeting innocent citizens going about their daily routines. Detectives focused their attention on local retail shelves, visiting neighborhood pharmacies and grocery stores across the western suburbs to seize every available bottle. Inspections of the physical inventory showed that the contaminated containers originated from entirely different manufacturing plants across North America. This crucial discovery proved that the toxic contamination had not occurred during the primary manufacturing process. Instead, an unknown perpetrator had surreptitiously removed the bottles from retail shelves, altered their contents in an off-site location, and returned them to store racks. At the Illinois State Police Crime Laboratory, forensic chemists carefully dissected the contents of the recovered medicine bottles under controlled microscopic conditions. The analysis revealed that the red and white capsule halves had been pulled apart by hand, filled with granular potassium cyanide, and carefully rejoined. The quantity of cyanide packed into each modified capsule was roughly 65 milligrams, a dosage more than 10 times the amount necessary to cause rapid fatal organ failure. As the body count threatened to rise, local law enforcement agencies formed a joint task force alongside state police officers and federal agents. Hundreds of investigators flooded the streets of Chicago, interviewing store clerks, reviewing delivery schedules, and sifting through thousands of tips. Command staff recognized that without immediate public intervention, additional casualties were mathematically inevitable. The operational posture shifted from standard post-crime investigation to an aggressive, large-scale containment operation designed to neutralize a lingering public threat.
Metropolitan police officers drove through municipal neighborhoods using public address loudspeakers to warn residents not to consume any capsule pain relief products. Hospital emergency rooms were quickly inundated with hundreds of anxious patients experiencing psychosomatic symptoms or fearing recent self-medication. Public health officials ordered an immediate regional freeze on all sales of the target medication, transforming quiet suburban shopping centers into active crime scenes where police officers bagged evidence directly from store display units. In the corporate headquarters of Johnson & Johnson, executive leadership monitored the widening law enforcement response while evaluating their global supply chain risks. Company leaders made the unprecedented decision to order a nationwide recall of all 31 million extra-strength Tylenol bottles currently in circulation. The logistical effort required pulling tens of millions of dollars worth of inventory off shelves across the globe. Forensic audits confirmed that the tampering was isolated exclusively to the Chicago area, directing all investigative focus back toward local retail aisles. Federal agents and state detectives meticulously examined regional distribution warehouses to verify supply chain custody procedures from production facility to retail display. Freight records, shipping manifests, and delivery logs showed no signs of security breaches or suspicious access during transit.
The structural integrity of the outer cardboard boxes was entirely uncompromised prior to store delivery. This evidence reinforced the conclusion that the perpetrator walked into public retail establishments acting as a common shopper while executing the lethal distribution. The tone of the national crisis shifted dramatically when a handwritten extortion letter arrived at the corporate offices of the manufacturer. The anonymous writer demanded $1 million deposited into a private bank account in exchange for halting the lethal poisonings. Federal Bureau of Investigation handwriting analysts and forensic fingerprint technicians immediately processed the document, tracing the listed bank details to a bank account associated with a man named James Lewis. Federal authorities launched an exhaustive manhunt for James Lewis, uncovering a complex history of financial fraud and deceptive identity maneuvers. Investigators located his secondary mailing addresses and interviewed former business associates to map his physical movements during the late summer of 1982. During intense interrogations following his arrest in New York, Lewis admitted to writing the extortion letter, but adamantly denied actually preparing or distributing the poisoned capsules in Chicago. Federal prosecutors hauled James Lewis into court on charges of extortion, constructing a persuasive narrative around his detailed financial motives and calculated deceit, although circumstantial evidence connected him to the extortion plot. Prosecutors lacked direct physical evidence linking his presence to the specific Chicago retail stores where victims bought the contaminated bottles. Court filings emphasize the distinction between monetary extortion and the act of murder, resulting in Lewis receiving a 20-year sentence strictly for the extortion conviction. Investigators continued to pursue alternative leads across northern Illinois, scrutinizing individuals
individuals who possessed chemical knowledge or harbored grievances against local retail stores. One suspect, Roger Arnold, drew intense interest after law enforcement discovered chemical handbooks and toxic compounds in his home during a search warrant execution. Despite exhaustive forensic testing, crime laboratory technicians failed to match any physical traces found at his residence to the specific cyanide compound recovered from the lethal capsules. Behavioral scientists within the Federal Bureau of Investigation analyzed the criminal methodology, categorizing the poisonings as an early form of untargeted domestic terrorism. The offender displayed a cold, detached psychological profile, taking advantage of open consumer access to inflict catastrophic harm without engaging in direct contact with the victims. This strategic anonymity left traditional homicide investigators with virtually no physical evidence, zero motive tied to the victims, and no recognizable eyewitness accounts. Inside federal forensic facilities, technicians utilized a state-of-the-art chemical spectroscopy to identify the specific industrial purity of the recovered potassium cyanide. Microscopic examination of the plastic bottle surfaces yielded partial latent fingerprints, but the technology of the era proved insufficient to produce a definitive match against national criminal databases. The lack of a conclusive forensic link left the primary murder investigation suspended in a frustrating state of legal limbo. Recognizing the systemic vulnerability of open-shelf pharmaceuticals, the Food and Drug Administration moved quickly to establish mandatory security regulations. The regulatory agency drafted strict federal guidelines requiring over-the-counter medicine to feature multiple layers of protective seal barriers before reaching public markets. This regulatory shift transformed the entire consumer product sector, establishing new standards for product safety that would rapidly expand across food and beverage industries nationwide. Engineers and industrial packaging designers across the country overhauled factory floor machinery to comply with the newly mandated federal regulations. Manufacturing lines introduced heat shrink plastic bands, foil inner drum seals, and tamper evident blister packs designed to reveal immediate visible damage if altered. These structural innovations ensured that consumers could inspect retail products before purchase, restoring public trust in essential medical supplies and everyday commercial goods. In 1983, the United States Congress officially passed the Anti-Tampering Act, criminalizing the intentional alteration of consumer products and elevating such acts to federal felony offenses. Lawmakers recognized that public health security required severe statutory penalties to deter potential copycat offenders.
Court records show that the legislation provided federal prosecutors with broad legal authority to pursue long prison sentences for any individual attempting to compromise consumer packaging. Over the following decades, cold case detectives periodically reopened the investigation, leveraging advances in modern forensic technology to reevaluate preserved evidence. In the late 2000s, federal law enforcement agents executed new search warrants and conducted advanced DNA processing on the original cotton stoppers and plastic bottles. Despite collecting fresh biological samples, laboratory results produced inconclusive profiles that failed to yield a definitive legal indictment for the cold case homicides. The investigative record remains filled with competing theories regarding whether the lethal acts were executed by a lone actor or a loosely associated network of copycats. The widespread media coverage during late 1982 sparked sporadic incidents of product tampering across various states, proving how vulnerable open retail systems truly were. Yet, despite decades of intense public interest and federal scrutiny, no individual has ever been formally charged in a court of law for the 7 Chicago murders. Modern crime labs continue to maintain custody of the physical evidence, preserving the original chemical samples and packaging materials under secure conditions. Forensic scientists periodically re-examine the physical evidence whenever new genetic sequencing techniques emerge within the field of forensic science. The ongoing commitment of law enforcement reflects a persistent drive to secure definitive legal resolution for the victims and their surviving family members. Today, every trip to a neighborhood pharmacy serves as a subtle reminder of the tragic events that unfolded across Chicago in late 1982. The introduction of tamper-evident seals altered consumer behavior and industrial design forever, creating a permanent barrier between open store shelves and the public. The safety protocols integrated into modern consumer packaging stand as a lasting legacy forged from one of the most complex, unsolved murder investigations in American history. The search for absolute judicial truth in the 1982 Chicago Tylenol poisonings endures through meticulous records, preserved forensic artifacts, and law enforcement dedication. While the perpetrator avoided a courtroom verdict for murder, the investigative lessons derived from the crisis reshaped federal law, forensic science, and consumer protection forever. The case stands as a permanent testament to the vital importance of rigorous evidence collection, systemic procedural adaptation, and the unrelenting pursuit of justice.